This is the Mental Metal Podcast, and I am your host, Coach Matt Toman. I'm a former athlete, teacher, coach, and athletic director that switched careers after surviving cancer and a stroke in the fall of 2020. But I'm also a dad of a son and a daughter that were successful high school athletes that went on to college. Now I use that experience along with my ICF coaching certification when helping teams, coaches, and athletes from all over the country. Each week, I will pose a specific question that will help coaches of all types better understand mental toughness. In the Mental Metal Podcast, coaches will learn to help their athletes overcome adversity without being the adversity they need to overcome. And welcome back to the Mental Metal Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Matt Toman, here as always every Monday morning, dropping a new episode. Have for over a year now. You can go back, check out more episodes. There's a lot of good content out there. I am so honored, so blessed to be able to put this content out here. It is, I just love doing it, talking to so many different people about how we can make athletes better, how we can make athletics better, how we can develop better young men, women, leaders, all those things. And that is the conversation we have for coaches, but parents listen, athletes listen. There's some really good stories, some really good tidbits to pick up for your own profession, for your own life. And that's what the Mental Metal Podcast is about. I love having these conversations, and I love seeing the ripple effect. People will watch an episode, then watch another one, then they get a hold of me, and then I start to see them implement some of the things that we talk about on the podcast with their own teams, with their own kids, and with their own athletes, and seeing that grow. And all because we're having conversations and putting this content out here. And how you can help me do more of that is to like and share and just talk about the Mental Metal Podcast and put it out there. It is a free resource for people, and I want as many people to hear these stories and hear this information as possible. There's just some really good guests, and today's guest is no exception. Coach Aaron Clark. Coach Clark he's got some similarities in what he does is what I do, and he's not coaching athletes anymore. He does his own coaching business for individuals, but he also does some public speaking. So we have something in common there. But just like me, he learned a lot of his lessons from being in education and coaching. And the really interesting thing about Coach Clark is anybody who's in education, especially if you're at a smaller school, if you're a coach, not even a smaller school, but a lot of times kids get out of, I say kids, but individuals get out of college and they go to want to coach. And Coach Clark was a football player, so he got to coach football. And he was like a defensive back coach for a while. But then before long, he was asked to coach soccer, and he was asked to coach bowling, and then he coached some motocross for a different reason and knew nothing about those. And that people are like, well, you can't do that if you don't know anything about those sports. Well, it happens all the time. You have coaches at public institutions, public schools, whatever, they get asked to coach things that they knew nothing about. And so I think this will strike a chord with some listeners because it happens all the time. And Coach Clark, he talks about the story about how he realized that if he wanted to be a better coach, he needed to act like a better coach, and he needed to soak up knowledge. He needed to start reading. He needed to start being a better leader before he was creating leaders. And he uses some cool analogies about how we need to help ourselves first, which I agree 100%. You got to become better yourself before you can make other people better. And but he was able to coach, again, soccer. He didn't know anything about soccer. He was able to coach bowling. He didn't know anything about bowling other than the obvious. And he coached motocross and didn't know anything about that. And he was successful in all three of those disciplines. If somebody's able to do that, paying attention to their coaching style and how they coach, it's worth listening to. And you're going to pick up the different things he's talking about and how he did that in this episode. But just a little teaser here, he focused on two things: competition in his practices and leadership. It's interesting to listen. He wasn't he wasn't coaching soccer players. He was coaching them to be leaders. He wasn't coaching them to be better bowlers. He was coaching them to be better leaders. And the same with the motocross. And he did that with football. Even though he knew more about football, he went on to other disciplines, learned about how to coach leaders, and then brought that back to his football and had more success. Again, that's worth paying attention to. If somebody's got this style that is able to create these leaders and create these winning programs despite knowing absolutely nothing about their sport, it's worth listening to. It's what we're trying to create. When you're a coach of young people, don't take this the wrong way, but the sport doesn't matter, right? And success matters some, but like the sport itself, you're only going to play football for a while. You're only going to play basketball for a while. Now bowling, maybe you can keep that up for the rest of your life, but there's a lot of sports that you don't continue to do just with age and just accessibility and opportunity. But the lessons you learn in leadership and competitiveness and those things, they translate to life. And the way Coach Clark did it is just another example of a coach that has figured out a way to do that, to create these leaders and help them do that, become better people, be better humans, and help society from it. And I love the story. So I just wanted to preface a little bit on where Coach Clark is coming from in a lot of this. So you're going to hear these stories, great stories. I enjoy the episode. Hopefully you do as well. Mettle is a person's ability to face adversity in a spirited and resilient manner. It is a great skill to have for athletics and for life, but it is not something we are born with. If you want it, you have to forge your mettle. And if you listen to the Mental Mettle podcast, you already know that, but not everybody else does yet. So help me out by ordering and wearing some sweet The Mental Mettle podcast gear. We've got short sleeve tees, long sleeve tees, and some super comfortable hoodies. Order online today and you can have your gear in no time. But the best part is that every order helps support the show and helps me spread the message that mental toughness is a trait that can and should be built. So find the link in the show notes, order your gear, and start showing that you know how to forge your mettle. Parents of athletes know that confidence and belief are fundamental for success. We want them to play without fear and without anxiety, but once those negative thoughts take over, it can derail years of work. Turning that anxiety into belief is similar to building strength and speed. It just takes intentional effort over time. Mental Mettle Coaching provides the individual drills needed to build the positive mindset necessary for success on the court and in life. Contact today to schedule a free coaching session and start building mental toughness in your athlete. And welcome back to the Mental Mettle Podcast. I am your host, Coach Matt Tillman, and I am here with my guest today, Coach Aaron Clark. How you doing, Coach?
Doing great, Coach. Excited to be on.
Yeah, no, I would love, we got a long story here to talk about it, all the things you do and all that, but this is a mental podcast, the Mental Mettle Podcast, a lot around athletics, and you don't do as much athletics as you used to, but you did. And
yeah,
if nothing else, and I think that's a great transition that we'll talk about later, how you got from athletics to where you are now, because I always talk about how athletics is just this great jumping off point for everybody on how it prepares you for other walks of life in a little bit in different ways. And if you can handle athletics and the ups and downs and the losses and the wins and all those things, you're going to be better prepared for all sorts of things in life. So the fact that you're doing it as an adult, kind of change careers doesn't really matter. There's a lot of lessons to be learned from athletics. And I want to start with your background in athletics. What'd you do as a kid?
Yeah, so as a kid, I did just about everything. Well, I played the big three, I think that was kind of what everybody did when we were young, coming up like we did in the 90s, that early 2000s.
Basketball, football, right?
Yeah, I mean, fall it was football, and winter it was basketball, and spring it was baseball, and then that whichever I could get any of the neighborhood kids to play in between, we played. Hockey, we we raced bicycles, whatever it was to compete. And then once I got to high school, I focused mostly then just on football. um, I'd kind of realized being under 6 foot and basketball was always my favorite sport. But I kind of realized, didn't have that great of handles, that wasn't putting it in the basket. If I wanted a free education, football was my ride out.
Yeah.
And so I switched over.
I mean, there's a definite genetic component to playing basketball and there is for just about every sport, but I think basketball is probably as much more than any of them. It has to be there.
Oh yeah, and I mean, and even after high school, went on and played college football at Belhaven University, and so that's when I
Okay.
would always tell all my players, I'm like, all right, let me explain something. You're smaller than me. You're not scoring a whole lot of points. And even as a small college at Belhaven, our shortest guy was 6'1".
Yeah.
They're long. They're long. And
Yeah.
so that's one I always thought was really cool, and being able to try to help with my players, just to not, I don't have unrealistic expectations. I'm not saying it can't happen. Um, but like you'd said, there's a genetic that thing that you just can't
There
fight.
is, and that's okay, right? You don't like it.
Right.
And you can love the sport, you can want to do the sport, but we put a lot of emphasis on, like you said, going and trying to get paid for your college, and that's like, yeah, have another plan, and if it happens, that's fantastic. But
Yeah.
but yeah,
Oh yeah, and people don't realize how, and I say just a general term. I don't. People don't understand how tough it is to play at the next level. I don't care what you're playing, where you play at,
it doesn't.
because I thought that at first. I was like, man, I can't. As small a school, that's the only one I got looking at me. Was an all district player. I was actually had University of Louisiana Lafayette looking at me until I pulled my hamstring. And so I tell them all the time, guys, you got to if you get an offer, signed. That's where I messed up. If I'd have signed, I've been able to say, yeah, I played D1 football, but I had to go to a small school, where people aren't as
Yep.
good. And I was like, good night. Everybody here is really good. I played with guys that won Arena Bowl championships. One was Arena Bowl MVP, that even made it into the NFL. So, I mean, when playing at the next level is tough, and you've got
Yep.
to be tough, and it's a grind. It's man, oh my goodness, it's another
That
level.
upside down fun. That upside down funnel goes. I mean, it gets tight quick when you go from high school to any level up. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, and that's what I used to tell my players out there, like, when they would ask us, because I was fortunate enough to be able to coach with guys that played. One of the coaches, our baseball coach, played in the farm system for the Red Sox, and so he was like, "Yeah, I know what they look like. I was there," but just telling everybody,
Yeah.
even playing with guys that play with colleges at LSU, Georgia Tech, or coaching with those guys, they're like, yeah, what's it like playing at the next level? The hardest you ever got hit in high school, that's every play times two.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're all
It's
fast. They're
yeah.
all
Yep.
big. It's
So
another
what
big.
position you play in? What position did you play in college?
So I started off at safety. I didn't weigh enough to but I wasn't fast enough to stay there. So they bulked me up to
Yeah.
about 235 and played outside linebacker, which was a lot of fun. Only did that for a year
Yeah.
and realized after a year and a half, so really 2 seasons, I just said, man, this is not for me. I'm tired of waking up at 5 a.m. every day to go work out at 6 a.m. To go to class at 7:30, to have this blah 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 all the way until 8, 9 o'clock every night. I was like, this is a job,
Yeah.
and I know I'm not going to get paid to do
It
this.
is.
So
Yeah.
I got tired of it. It's tough. It's
But you
tough.
took it's really tough. But clearly you got your education and moved into doing some coaching of your own.
Yes, yeah, and so yeah, coaching is definitely where I got it started, and loved every second of it. Um, was fortunate enough to actually, my first team that I was a part of, that we ended up making it to the semifinals. And I mean, all I was the guy with the clipboard upstairs charting plays for the
Yeah.
offensive coordinator and
Hey.
like, hey, yeah, here's what happened last series. Okay, yep, I'll write down. But that's where it started. And so you'd kind of, I got real comfortable there, ended up moving. That when I got to my well, really my third stop is when I moved, we became a varsity coach, and just realized how hard I had taken for granted how hard it was to win. It was something I always knew, but playing on, I was on very successful high school teams as a player. I mean, that we broke even in college, but that you take for granted when you go from your first couple of high schools where you're in the playoffs, deep in the playoffs every year, to finally becoming that varsity coach. How hard it is to win. I mean, we didn't win, but I think the 3 years I was there, we won 8 games.
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, when you're a new young coach and you get a program to call your own, it's usually not a gift. It's like if it you know what I mean. Usually, it's a program that is worthy of a first year head coach, right?
yeah, and I wasn't even the head coach, so I'd finally become a
Yeah,
varsity assistant, as
yeah. That
yeah, but I did get
it's
I was the head soccer coach, which was a
okay.
trip because we won no games that first year because I didn't know how to hold people accountable, how to challenge them, without just being that old school coach. If you messed up, I yelled, and that's what
Yeah.
I got as a player, so that's
Oh, well,
what
that's
all I understood.
it's interesting that you say that because it's funny. That's how we got coached, and I feel like you and I turned out okay.
Hmm.
But for whatever reason, we could go into this whole long diatribe about what's different and all that, but it just doesn't work much anymore.
Yeah, and that was so at Walker High School is where I learned how to be, and kind of what started my shift towards the training that I do now with leadership and personal development. That was where I learned how to actually coach. And I had a player, without going too great of details, that we were run. It was in 2-a-days, and my safety kept getting beat deep. I mean, it was probably like the fourth or fifth touchdown he'd given up in a row. And so, I mean, I'm on him, and he was a good player. I mean, that he was on the all district team the previous year. So, I mean, he knew how to play ball. I was like, it's cover two. Like, what are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do? And he was just like you could feel him fuming up. And I was like, he might actually swing at me if I keep this up, but I'm going to keep it up. Because I was a
Yeah.
young, arrogant coach.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah. I'm not
he
going to let
finally,
him win, right?
yeah, oh yeah, I couldn't let him win. But he finally goes, all right,
No, no.
we don't have a 2 on the team, and number 1 is on the other side of the field. Why do you keep telling me to watch him? And I was like, my players don't know how to count
Yeah.
wide receivers. They don't.
Yeah.
I mean, coach, I went and sat on the bench at practice. My head coach started yelling at me, and I'm like, Coach, I don't know. Like they can't count receivers. They can't, like, this is why we're not good. And like mental breakdown almost, because I'd never
Yeah. And
experienced that as a coach.
yeah,
I
you
was like
got,
my fifth
there's
or
a lot
sixth
of
year
assumptions.
coaching.
Yeah. You made some assumptions there, right? That he wasn't working hard or he wasn't do this. And it was a knowledge thing. And that's where his frustration was coming from.
Exactly, and that's what kind of started the whole. All right, I've got to become a better. So if I'm going to want to be a successful coach, I got to become a better coach, and started that personal growth journey myself then, and started reading books. So I read, had read John Gruden's book. I read Pete Carroll's book, Nick Saban's book, and then ultimately, because I was still trying to learn that first year being the head soccer coach, I didn't know nothing about nothing. It wasn't
Yeah.
until I read, which I would recommend to anybody, any coach. If you're looking to coach, think this is a great book by Tim Galloway, The Inner
Hmm.
Game of Tennis. If they
It's
hadn't read
phenomenal.
that book, I mean, and
It's
it's not about
phenomenal.
tennis at all. um,
No, no. I think that's the it's a detriment to the book, because I think people look at it and they see it and they're like, I don't want to read it. And I'm like, it has nothing to do with tennis. I mean, it does, but it doesn't. It's like, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it literally, I mean, it
I
should be
agree.
named
Phenomenal
the inner
book.
game of competition. That's what it should be called. And,
Yeah,
what got me onto
yeah.
that was what Pete talked about in his book. And I was like, well,
Hmm.
hold on, Pete Carroll's reading a tennis book. I'll read a tennis book. That dude's winning national
Yeah,
championships and Super Bowls. I'll do whatever it takes to. And as I read it and finally understood, okay, I got to do something different to help my players to be different. And I mean, even though we didn't win a whole lot of games that next year, that soccer or on the football field, that we started to develop a toughness in my positions that I coached in football. I was also became the special teams coordinator, and I mean, it got to a point where teams they wouldn't kick to me. Uh, I mean, everything soon became a squib kick out of bounds, or they wouldn't punt to me, and it changed a lot as we started getting good and a little bit more tough in that aspect. And it really shaped how I started coaching my players, not telling them, "Hey, great job." No, it was all right. You took this right step and told them why they did exactly what it was, instead of
yeah,
allowing that ego to get, yeah, good me, pat myself
yep,
on the back.
yeah,
And they moved into another level, and we played in a lot of games that year that we had no business playing in. Soccer specifically, we took two state quarterfinal and a semifinal team. We took them all right down to the wire and only lost like 2-0 in one game and 1-0 in another. And then we actually tied one of them that was in the state championship the year before. So it's like, and we
yeah.
had no business being in those games, but the kids started to buy in and believe at that point that they could do it.
I think it's important that you mentioned something. You mentioned that when you talked about what you choose to praise. And I think that there's a lot to be said for that. I don't know if you've read the book, and if you haven't, I suggest it. Mindset by Carol Dweck, and it's she
Hmm.
talks. They've done a ton of research on this. That like one of the most detrimental things we can do is to constantly praise, like just praise wins or praise things kids have no control over, like praising a kid for getting an A when they're just naturally smart, or praising a kid for being fast when he's just genetically gifted. They don't
Yeah.
learn that's they don't learn the work ethic, and they don't learn what's important. They don't think that it's the results based, and I can't have anything to do with it. And so in her book, and as you know,
Hmm.
it's about praising the effort, and it's about praising
Hmm.
the decisions that you to do and do things right so that you can improve. And that's what we're trying to do as coaches. We're not just trying to get wins. That's something we like to get along the way. But if you're not praising effort, and they're not improving, you're only gonna win the games that they were gonna win, whether or not you were there or not. Right?
Right. Yeah. And so that was kind of when things changed for me. I mean, and I'm kind of, if just in case they're not familiar, I know you probably can't see with all my lights, but that book, The Inner Game of
No,
Tennis,
I got it.
changed
Yep.
a lot. Um, and whenever I which ended up being my second to last stop before, which was technically my first coaching spot, I ended up back there. That was when I really figured out how to be a head coach, but was still just an assistant on football, but got put in charge of the girls' soccer team, and I started creating things, ways for us to compete all the time. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I started, if we can go hard and we get everything we accomplish I want to accomplish in 30 minutes, even though I've got an hour scheduled, we'll finish in 30 minutes just because y'all worked hard. And a lot. And then that summer program that we did that year was the first time I really implemented something to where everything, like literally we kept score for everything, coach. So if you showed
Yeah.
up to summer workout, that was 10, like you had to be early. Because I believe there's one or two people. You're either early or you're late. If you're on time, you're late. And so I would start
Yeah.
calling out roll 10 minutes before practice while we're stretching and getting ready. So if you weren't there when we started stretching, you were late. So your team got 10 points just by you being there. And there became
Mm-hmm.
competitions for everything. If that because I wanted to put them in game-like situations all the time. We can't, you always thinking as a coach, how do I replicate game scenarios? How do I get that intensity? Well, you just make it a game at practice. And it could have
Yeah.
been something as simple as, if you don't make this pass correctly, right here, it's one touch, that you're going to kick it back in, that you shoot, you score. If we don't do that, y'all are going around the field. They don't care. Everybody will run around the goal, and so they put pressure on themselves. When they got in the game scenario, it was nothing. Like, oh, I've been here, done
Yeah.
this, and
I think
it
that
really
putting that
translates.
competition into your practice is yeah, it translates. It translates, and it's putting in that and seeing that competition and seeing that pressure in a less competitive, a less pressure filled situation, and working your way up, right?
Right, and it did. I mean, it even so. I started even doing it as I was coaching football, just my position. Because even though I'm not the head coach, but I can do this with my group. They gave me that freedom, and so we would put like, all right, I'm in charge of running you today. If they so and FR, because I also did special teams there too. I said, if the kicker can make this field goal, we've got to run on the field in 15 seconds, no timeouts. That he makes this kick, we don't run. And
Mm-hmm.
so if he missed it, everybody ran. All right, let's do it again. If you can make it, we don't run another one. And just to get, and finally, they usually about the third one would make it, and they're used to that pressure now. Oh, I got to run on the field. Yeah, I've been there, done this. A
It's
lot of
putting them
cool
in those
things.
situations and putting those situations and letting them do it until they see that success, build the confidence from it, and it's a great system.
Yeah.
Mental Metal Coaching is driven by a passion for sharing knowledge and experience that will allow athletes and coaches to grow, play, and live in a positive way. We offer a range of coaching and professional development services. First and foremost, we offer individual mental coaching for athletes, and it's easily the most efficient and effective way to help athletes replace fear and anxiety with positivity and confidence. Mental Metal Coaching has helped middle school setters to high school lacrosse middies to D1 offensive linemen. If you have an athlete that needs to improve their mindset in athletics, mental coaching is the answer. We also offer team coaching, which uses the same concepts as individual mental coaching, but applies them in a group setting. Team bonding outings are great, but they do nothing to address the thoughts and feelings that can derail a team. Team coaching does address that, and it's a great option for helping your team grow. Finally, Mental Metal Coaching offers social, emotional learning, professional development programs for educators and coaches. There are self-paced online programs, there are virtual coaching options, and even in-person seminars available. This PD will help increase the mental health of your staff and eventually your student athletes and the culture of your school. All of the Mental Metal coaching programs have the same goal. Our mission is to help athletes and coaches develop a resilient and spirited mindset that will help them confidently face any obstacles or challenges they seek, regardless of their situation. If you would like to see the same in your athlete, your team, and your staff, contact Coach Toman for more information.
It was also the first place that what I did. I'm sure, as you know, you were head coach, because all the things you get as a head coach, the text messages, the phone calls, the emails from parents, and this and that. So it was the first place that I actually implemented where the only people that had direct access to me were my seniors. And so I started to coach them to be the leaders of my team. It was the first time that I did it more so I got tired of getting text and call, and everybody was calling me, and I was like, all right, cool. Putting these 4 seniors in charge of the team. If you have a question, you call them. And my seniors would tell them stuff that you and I couldn't tell them. Like, seriously, you didn't pay attention in the stinking meeting? Like, why are you calling me about this? They mentioned it. Whereas if you and I
You're
did
right.
that,
Yeah, it's funny You say that it's like what a great idea because your seniors will be like, look, you gotta get with it because you're not like this. I'm glad you didn't go to coach with this because this is a stupid question, right? Like we
Yeah.
would be paying attention, right?
No, and they would call me.
That's actually a great idea.
Oh, coach, they would call me. My players would call me, be like, "Oh, did you talk to Matt?" Well, no. All right, cool. Call him. Click. And I didn't care if it was a parent or not. Hey, did your kid call their senior? No. Cool. Tell them to call them. Click. And they eventually call. Now, I mean, if it was something serious like that, I needed to know
I got
about.
you.
But
I got you.
if it was
But that's
practice,
but how many times? Yeah, but how many times does that happen in a year where there's something serious? Once or twice? I mean, it's like most of it's motive, most of it's tedious, and
hmm
you don't need it, right? It's yeah,
right? And I was super communicative with everybody. Like I got all my parents' emails, and on Sunday evening, I would send out a, "Hey, here's the agenda for the week. Here's what we got planned, et cetera, et cetera." So it wasn't like I wasn't communicating with you, but it started saving me a lot of those reply to text. Hey, do we have practice today? Yes. Do we have practice? Yes. Do we have a game today? Yes. It looks like it's going to rain. I mean, we live in South Louisiana. It rains all the time. Send. Yes. But it stopped a lot of that, but it taught me how to teach other people to lead. And,
yeah,
that's magic whenever you're able to teach your team to be in charge of your team. And that was that team that year actually went in one district in soccer, which hadn't been done ever. And but it was because the seniors were in charge of the team, but I was teaching them how to be the leaders of the team. They were responsible for setting up our field for practice. I would give them a practice plan. Hey, here's the drills I want to get done. Yeah, are y'all on board with that? Yep, cool. And we would meet after practice. This is what I'm thinking we need for tomorrow. What do you think? Okay, so what happened with Johnny over here? What happened with Sally over there? What happened? And we would talk through it much like you would talk through with your assistant coaches after, if you were on a
hmm
larger staff. Well, it was me, a volunteer coach, and at, at that time it was 26 girls. So I needed help on how to do it, and I just did it out of necessity, not because it was something that I was like, this is a genius idea. Let's do that.
Well, yeah, but it also is like it's a
Mhm.
great like you said. We were talking about how it circumvents a lot of issues you're gonna have to deal with, but it's got those seniors learning those leadership roles rather than it elevates them in a way that I'm not surprised that you had a good year doing that.
Right. And so, I mean, after that season, that was a tough one because our district downsized, and so they started going through. All right, we got to get rid of. I think it was like 30 or 40 teachers, and we didn't bring in a whole lot of teachers. So I was like the 10th to last teacher, so I got cut. So that
Yeah,
was tough. Being having to, after we went through, we did all that, and having to tell, I was like, well, can I at least tell the team? I just want to tell them bye. There's nothing. Wasn't hard feelings. I come from a family of
yeah,
business owners. Um, that's all I've known. So I know stuff happens, and
yeah.
no, but it wasn't until in my last stop, and so I mean, you see all the EA bowling stuff up here. That was my third head coach gig. Was supposed to just have been either an assistant baseball coach or assistant track coach, along with football.
hmm
That's when they picked me up, and I was like, hold on. They were like, Coach, we need a head coach for bowling. Would you like to do it? And I was like, hold on, bowling's a team sport? And they went, well, yeah, it's a team sport. And I was like, so like, when it's hot outside, you're inside and it's cool. And they're like, well, yeah, coach, it's bowling. Where else you going to be? And I said, so like, it's cold
yeah.
outside, cold and raining like soccer season was. I'm inside and warm. They said, well, yeah, it's bowling. You're inside. And I was like, can I eat like,
And it doesn't rain inside, so you're good there. Yeah.
yeah, I was like, so can I do like eat nachos and drink a Coke? And they said, Coach, it's bowling. Yes, you can. I said, sign me up. This is way better than track and baseball, man.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it was there that did the same thing. Hey, you want me? You got to get to my seniors. You got to go through your senior. But it wasn't until the second year that I kind of started. All right, so I've been split my team into two, um, or three, or however many seniors I had. That's how it got split up. And that year, what I did, because I only had two seniors, so I took them, put them in charge. But then I had four juniors. So I took my four juniors and said, hey, I'm going to put y'all in charge of a freshman. You're in charge of making sure, checking in on how their class is going. That way, by the time they became a senior, I wasn't having the same talks every year with. And so, I mean,
Right.
coach, I wasn't literally the last 2 years that I coached. We ended up in the state finals both years. Didn't win, but we were there. And I wasn't I wasn't doing a whole lot. And it was them running the team, them understanding. I mean, I really was able to implement those intergame, that visualization and know, just doing all that stuff there. Working on leadership, teaching them how do you talk to somebody when they're having a hard time? How do you help them to advocate for themselves when they're struggling in a teacher's class? It was just magical. And that team, and now so this past year was the first year that they weren't in the state finals. They still hadn't won one, but it was one of my seniors who's now the head coach. And so I called her
Yeah.
afterwards just to look, congratulations. You made it to the quarters. A great job. And she's like, coach, this is the first, I'm feel embarrassed because it's the first year since whatever. I was like, but sweetheart, you remember when we sucked.
Yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
was like,
Oh yeah.
so this is awesome that you can remember this. And going forward, I said, I think you're the right person because you actually understand bowling. She went and played at Alabama State, that on full ride. It was all American, all that stuff in bowl. So I was like, you're the right person. I still don't understand bowling. I just, you roll the ball down, you hit pins. If you don't hit them on the first one, you
Well,
throw it again.
I understand. Yeah, I mean, I understand it, but I'm not going to be able to coach it. And I think that's what's interesting. So, so you cleared up my one question. Did you know anything about bowling? And you said no.
No.
Did you know anything about soccer when you took over soccer?
That you kick a ball into the net.
Okay, so no, right? So you had the most cursory like knowledge of both those sports, but
Yeah.
but you take it and you get to be successful because you're coaching leadership and you're coaching humans and kids to be better people and just work on their skill sets despite the fact that you don't know anything about the sports.
Right. And that's all I did. And so, I mean, it easily translated that, like when I was coaching defensive backs the last 4 years I was there, I had only 1 year. So I had East Ascension the 4 years I coached. I only had 1 year that I didn't have an all-state player. But I put those guys in charge. Same thing. Hey, if you're going to miss practice, you better let them know, because don't call me. And so I really allowed them to lead and communicate. And I mean, the first year I was only in charge of corners, but then I was in charge of the entire secondary for the last 3 years. And so that was a lot of fun being able, and we did the same thing. I mean, I would take them out to dinner, and that was an expensive dinner when you got,
Mm-hmm.
so I think I had at that time 25 kids. So when I took them out to dinner, it was like, guys, I need y'all to like be friendly to me. But I would treat like if we were doing a competition, the winning group, the winning team, hey, y'all can order whatever y'all want. The rest of you guys, y'all get that sandwich, and yeah, that's it. But it let them know winners and losers are treated differently, in a fun way that let them know that I cared about them and loved them. And the same fact that it kept, I mean, you want to see some kids get aggravated about one of their teammates not showing up to practice. Make it a competition on somebody's getting steak and
Yeah.
somebody's eating hot dogs.
Yeah. No, that's true. I just love the idea that you're creating. It's more about creating the environment than it is about the sport, and it's like I feel comfortable that you could go in and coach a badminton team or a some of the sport, especially the sports where they had their own kind of like skill sets a little bit already. I'm sure like the boulders already knew how to bowl, right? So it's
Actually,
things
we
like
did
that.
not. So, coach, that's why I think
Okay.
it's funny. The last two, like when I got there, they told me, "All right, you got to have at least, or you need four to have a match. But if you want to be like any shot of winning, you need six." And so that first year, I only had four girls, and then but I had
Mhm.
six boys exactly. So if one of them like, "Hey, I got strep throat," I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is going to be miserable." But there were times like the girl, so Bailey, who's now the head coach for East Ascension, we would win games just because she was that good. She would go win her point, help us win the overall score without going too much in deep, and we would win games with
Yeah.
only four people. So the next year I said, all right, I don't know any better what I'm doing, but I'm going to recruit. And so I went and recruited my high school. I taught freshmen. So I said, hey, who wants to come join bowling? And we didn't know how to bowl. We were bad, but because teaching those skills and what have you, they learned and developed. And it's kind of really cool
Yeah.
that at seeing now as I didn't at first follow a lot of my players on social media, but I started recently, like within probably like 2019, 2020, when I got out, just to see, what are they doing? I wanted to be able to follow and just seeing that they're
Yeah.
having those successful careers. They're in management. They're one, I got a couple that have started their own businesses. It's really cool to see where they've gone and knowing that you had a part in that because realistically, we
Oh,
know you're coaching high school. 5% go on and play at the next level.
I feel like that's high. Like it's not very many, right?
Yeah.
So you mentioned when you got out, and I really want to get into that. We're having a good conversation here, but I want you don't coach anymore, or at least high school athletics, and you switched, and you've got your own business, and I'm very interested in that transition and how
Okay.
that happened.
Yes. So that was a weird one. So, person of faith, very proud of my belief in Christ as Savior and Lord. Um, and so I started praying. I felt the need to move. Every time that I felt it was time to leave, and I didn't want to leave. I loved where I was at. Even though I was ready to be a head football coach, I'd had a couple opportunities, but and they never felt right. Felt that it was time to move, time to start, go somewhere else. Had no idea where it was. Um, in 2018, my youngest son came to me and started, hey, I really want to race dirt bikes. We used to own Harley Davidson in New Orleans. So, I mean, motorcycles was always part of our life. We liked watching the racing, but my brother raced. I didn't, I tried it a couple times, got a brand new shoulder out of it. Um, so it wasn't anything that I was doing other than just,
Right.
watching it. And so I was like, all right, well, if you want to do it, kind of same thing. I know nothing about coaching motocross. So, but I do know that if you look on YouTube, you can find videos to coach whatever you want to coach, fix a car motor, hang lights, whatever. And so that was what really got me looking to change. I ended up at the time starting a hotshot business because I had no clue what I wanted to do at that point. It was from as long as I can remember. I wanted to coach. I wanted to coach, play football, and coach football. That's the literally since I was 8 years old. And so when he was telling me this, I was like, "You got to give me about a year to figure it out, champ. I don't know. I don't know anything about motocross, and I know what little I do know. I know I can't coach football and bowling and do motocross. I know I can't do that."
Right.
And so that was what got me out originally. So I did Hot Shot and was running a pretty successful business with it. But what ended up moving me back to Delta College so we own Delta. My family owns it. My grandfather started it in 1971. And then my uncle and my dad called me and said, hey, we really want you to come back into the business. And so I
Now,
was like,
for everybody, what and this Delta College? Tell me a little bit about that.
yeah, so we're a proprietary school, think trade school. We specialize in licensed practical nurses or licensed vocational nurses, medical assistant, dental assistant, medical office with billing and coding. And then we also offer an associate degree in graphic design. And so we help people get into their
Different,
careers
very,
as fast as
yeah,
possible.
very, yeah, very means to an end. Yeah,
Right.
means to an end. Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, and so when they called me, I mean, I had no intention of going back. Some of it was to prove to Granddad that, hey, yeah, you
Sure.
said I can't do it on my own. I can do it on my own. But when they came back and they were telling me, hey, this is how bad things are, I was like, all right, if I can get my business to sell, I'll come back. And the very first person I called said they gave me more than what I was expecting to get from them. Said the deal was signed within 48 hours. So, I mean, definitely a God thing, which got
Yeah,
me back
absolutely.
into it. And I just kind of came in and doing the same thing that I've done everywhere else. I didn't know a whole lot about the industry, but I know how to create leaders and help people to learn how to be a leader and hold people accountable. And, the one that, like, the the very first one when I got there, I was like, look, we got to get this person off of our team. And they're like, how are you going to feel about firing them? I said, I've cut kids off of sports teams. I ruined their
Yeah.
dreams. Are you kidding me? This is a grown adult. He's 50.
Oh, this is easy, right?
Yeah, I was like, this is easy.
It's the
They couldn't
worst,
believe
man.
I felt that way.
Uh, it's absolutely the worst to have to cut a kid, right? It's just the
Oh,
worst.
oh my! And I didn't. I refused to coach. I refused to just put it on a list and post it on the wall.
Oh no!
I wanted. I
You
told.
have to have a conversation.
Yeah,
You
I
have to
told
have a
them.
conversation.
Um, and I wanted to tell them one on one to that way. Because I knew I was going to have to face them again. But I wanted them to. Hey, if I still want you to be able to come and talk to me. How do we help you become better? And if it's not through this sport, well, let's get you involved over there. And there were several that got involved in other activities and was able to keep that relation. Like that he ended up going, he got a theater scholarship. I don't remember where, but theater was his thing. Cool. Well, let's get you help there.
Sure.
One was in agriculture. One, I had one that he came, he graduated high school and signed a huge deal with Exxon Mobil. I don't remember what the exact thing, but it was more than I was making as a coach. Um,
Well, that usually doesn't take too much, right?
oh no, I mean anything over a
I
nickel an
gotcha.
hour better than what we were getting as coaches.
That's, right. I know. Yeah. So you're back at the school there, and you're doing that, but
Mhm.
then you're also working into your own business as well, right?
Yeah, so I do the Coach A. Clark company. It's a leadership and personal growth. I like to do training and want other people to experience, everything that I've experienced. I know what personal growth, and if you'd have asked me, you can see, I never thought 15, 20 years ago that I'd have had books on a shelf behind me. That I thought they'd have been state championship trophies, but I didn't realize, and
Hmm.
and I think this is one a lot of people don't realize, is how important that personal growth is to them, and to understand that your mind, that reading is to your mind what exercise is to your body, and if you want to become a better fill in the blank, you've got to have a better mind. I don't care what it is. There's no such thing as a dumb athlete in pro sports anymore. They're all extremely intelligent.
No, I agree. I'm
So
sure we can find some exceptions, but for the most part,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, you could find a few exceptions, but for the most part, they're all extremely intelligent. They're all, and so, and like learning how tough, how to be a competitor, how to do all those things. I love looking at guys. Everybody wants to talk about, Michael Jordan. He's my favorite competitor of all time. Probably my next favorite is Tom Brady. And you look at those guys that had to work so hard. People don't see what they did in the dark when nobody else was around. That when they were just hurting. And I've loved reading about that Michael Jordan, just that finding out all this is different stuff. Kobe Bryant is another one that I love. They just, hey, Kobe's, oh yeah, I can, if I tape this finger to my other finger, I can continue to play. Yeah, I won't have surgery ever.
Yeah.
But people don't see that because it's in a dark room. It's just them. They're covered in sweat and they're working to make themselves be the best they can be. You see, Michael won 6 championships, but did you pay attention to the previous 7 years? Like Michael Jordan got his
Yeah.
butt whooped for
Oh, I mean,
7 years.
we love that. Yeah, we love the result, right? That's just what it's
Hmm.
about, right? We like the
Yeah,
result. It's not the fun part. Yeah.
right. But that's what it takes, and and that's as you're. with your podcast with the mental metal, that's what I think mental toughness is like doing something over and over again, that without regard to how hard it is. I mean, you know how tough it is. And that's why I think everybody should be forced to play some sort of extracurricular, whether it's JROTC, the ag, that theater. There's gonna, I mean, choir. Those kids work. They should be forced to be a
Yeah.
part of something, because it's tough when you want to give up. You've got other people that are going, no, get back on the line. You're going to run with us. We ain't stopping running till. And so you're held to that accountability level. It's such it, it pushes you to another level mentally to know that, oh, if I can go run 10 suicides, they're seriously finishing a TPS report that might cause me an extra hour at work. Yeah, that's easy.
Yeah.
um
No amount of athletic talent or physical ability can overcome a poor mindset. Anxiety, fear, and negativity will always diminish an athlete's abilities and limit their success. If you're not intentionally developing your child's mental toughness, then they are not reaching their full potential. Mental Mental Coaching provides the individual drills needed to build the positive mindset necessary for success on the court and in life. Contact today to schedule a free coaching session and start building mental toughness in your athlete. You can't make chicken salad out of chicken feathers, or perhaps you've heard it or even said the other version. Regardless, good coaches should not blame a lack of success on the players they get to coach. It's a lame excuse, and I'm sorry if that ruffles your feathers. But it's your job as a coach to develop your players. If your athletes lack skill or mental toughness, it's your responsibility to develop it. But how do you make today's athlete tougher without risking breaking them? Well, Mental Mental Coaching now offers professional development for coaches, explaining how to do just that. The program is called Ember to Inferno, Building Mentally Tough Athletes. It teaches real tools and tangible methods that are proven to increase the mental health and toughness of athletes. The program is available as an in-person seminar or as virtual small group coaching. Don't wish for mentally tough athletes. Build them. Contact Mental Mental Coaching today. Yeah. And so all of this knowledge, all this stuff you're doing, your business and all this stuff, we haven't even mentioned yet that, I mean, you do your own podcast, right? Tell me
yeah.
a little bit about that.
And so, yeah, my podcast is same thing. Like I was saying, it's really focused on that leadership and personal growth. And then I bring guests on like yourself for, I want to talk, I like to highlight entrepreneurs, because it's such a cool thing. I think entrepreneurs, it's a tough road to get out. You're on your own. People see it as this glorious thing that, oh man, they've got it made. They're on their own. And it's like, no, that guy or girl is up until 1, 2, 3 in the morning. They go to bed. They worried, can I pay my bills tomorrow? Wake up at 4 a.m. and do it again. And it's a struggle to get all that going through. And so being able to talk to people to show that, but then also the ones that are still doing it and able to go, there are so many different leadership lessons that you've had to learn. You've got to learn how do I manage my priorities? And I say priorities because I don't think there is such thing as time management other than in a sports game. Because I can't, much as I'd like to and go time out and rewind some stuff right now, I can't do that.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen in life. So you got to learn how to manage those priorities. How do I hold people accountable? How do I build a team? What should I be learning? What should I read? What should I watch? What are things that I can do to grow myself? How do I find a mentor? What do I look for in a mentor? There's so many things that
And
people
that's,
don't
I
realize.
think that, yeah. And I think that thing about being an entrepreneur that I didn't realize I mean, most entrepreneurs start, you're probably by yourself, right? Like
Yeah.
you're every part of it. And it's like, I talk to my wife about that all the time. It's like, okay, I'm getting up today and I got all these things I could do, but I don't know, like when you talk about priorities, it's like, I don't know what I need to be focusing on first, right? Because it's not because what's best or whatever. It's like a lot, and sometimes it feels like what's the right answer to actually keep the business going and growing, and it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah. Well, it's one that I use, and I used a lot whenever I was teaching, is I would tell people all the time, well, what's half of 8? And
It's 4.
Well, why not 3? I mean, if I cut it in half, it could be 3, it could be E, it could be M or W. If I flip it on its side, it could be 0. Now, and all are right answers, but maybe 3 is not the right answer right now. Maybe it is 4. Now, that's what you're doing when you
Yeah,
move on to an entrepreneur or leadership in general.
it's yeah. You don't really know what you're supposed to be doing, and it's hard at sometimes.
Very much so. And that's where it kind of came about. I like speaking to groups and businesses and I've spoken to high school teams, organizations about leadership and personal growth because it's that important. And I know what it's done for me. I wish I'd have started my personal growth journey not in that 2011. I wish I'd have started it back when I first got introduced to it in 2008. When I
Yeah,
got my first coaching gig, I didn't understand what my head coach was saying. That was one of my mentors. Like, hey, what do you got to read books? And I'm like, man, what a nerd who reads books, you know? This guy does now, but when you're able to realize and make that connection that it's that important for me in my own life and how it's going to help you to become better. I love being able to share that type of stuff with um, like groups of people, and it's I've had a hard time with me focusing in on who do I want to be mine because leadership is for everybody. I believe everybody can
I
be a
agree.
leader. Um,
Everybody can lead from where they are. There's
exactly.
it's not a single position.
Yeah.
What's the when you go and speak to schools, teams, whatever? What's the main message?
The main message is that you've got to focus on yourself first. Now, and people go, whoa, 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 whoa. But let's be real honest. Whenever you're on an airplane, what do they tell you? Hey, in case of loss of
I use
oxygen, when it drops, you put it on yourself first, and then well, if I can't, and it's another great one that I tell everybody that anybody should read is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey.
Mhm.
And that's the
Yep.
first thing it talks about is be proactive. You got to look out for yourself. And it's not saying that you're being selfish and that I don't care for Matt. That since we're on here, I'll just pick on you. But if I'm not helping Aaron first, I can't help you. And I pass out because we're on a
Right.
plane and we lose oxygen. Well, it doesn't matter that I helped you put on your mask because now I'm passed out. So you got to help yourself, and then you can help others. And people, that's where the leadership comes in. And that was one that my owners they really struggled with at first when I was saying I got to focus on growing our team as a leader. And they're like, well, they have bosses. And I'm like, no, 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 no. They need to be a leader. A leader isn't always the boss. But if you have a
No.
group of leaders, you're not managing them. And I'm starting to see a couple of them come to fruition where literally I show up once every month and do nothing with them. That they got this. Cool. Y'all go do your thing.
There you go. Yeah. And that's the goal, right?
Right.
I think that's the coolest part about that. And we're in similar capacities here in the way we coach people and stuff like that. You're constantly, if we do our job well, we're working ourselves out of a job, right? They don't need
Yeah.
us anymore,
Right. Well,
and
that's what I
that's
want.
okay.
That was
Yeah,
when
I
I
know,
discovered that as a head coach. It was
but
awesome.
yeah, right.
So
Yeah, no, man, I love the progression from. I love how intentional and how well you can look back at your story and see these things that you picked up and how you started developing them and how it's grown. Um, I think that's a really. I don't know if you recognized it all at the time or if it's something you've gone and looked at as you can't move. Like, oh, I was figuring this out and I was figuring this out. Either way, it's a good
yeah,
exercise, but people should do that.
yeah. It definitely. Whenever I realized it, it was when I got to So when I circled back to Central High School in 2011 or 2013, 12 or 13, I don't remember. That was when I kind of realized, all right, I'm on to something. And was glad that I wasn't a head coach of a football or basketball or baseball where they expect you
Right.
to perform right away,
Right.
and was able to, well, let me try this, let me try that, and found out, hey, this works. and I can implement that any and everywhere. And other coaches would ask me, like, what are you doing? Why is your bowling team so successful? Here's what I do. We play a lot of games. I mean, I had my bowlers doing push-ups. Nobody else had their bowlers doing push-ups. I'd have them, they'd jog to the end of the alley and back if they didn't pick up their spare. I wanted them to feel that all the time. And they were like, yeah. And I was like, well, that's how I'm where I'm at. And I don't run practice. The seniors do.
Yeah. It's funny how when you do something like that, like when you're successful at something, people ask you the answer, and you give them they give you the question, you give them the answer, and they're like, nah, I don't think I want to do that. I'm like, then why are you asking?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
I
but it
mean, I handed
happens.
one my handbook. They were like, "Is this for real?" I said, "Yeah, this is the same thing I give them. Here, you can have it." And they're like, "Yeah, I ain't doing that." And they gave it back, and I was like,
Yeah. Well,
"Okay."
I think that, the status quo and the way we've always done it, or the way you think coaching is supposed to be done, is very well ingrained in a lot of people. And they're just like, well, that can't work. Right. And that's why a lot of people never change it, and their programs don't change, and they, get stuck in the way it was.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's
And
been it's been a fun
it's unfortunate.
journey.
Yeah. And the whole thing you're doing it. I mean, I know you're putting kids in tough situations. They're running, they're doing all these things, but I mean, they're enjoying that, right? They're learning.
Hmm.
They feel they're enjoying those situations, which is just very important.
Oh yeah, and I mean even stuff mental stuff I would do with. So I had one that was a hothead. Good Lord, it didn't take much for him to fight, and we were playing a big rival game. And so I always ran the scout team. I loved running the scout team for football. Everybody was like, oh, who's going to, I'm like, put me in charge of the scout team. Cause that's important. And I was trying, if on the Wednesday practice, we would always have a JV game that night. So they didn't want to practice hard. I'm like, guys, if we score more touchdowns today than they do on the varsity defense, that donuts Monday morning for everybody. Because they didn't come on Saturdays. And so, I mean, you'd have them coming in
Right.
there Monday morning. If they score more, well, let me get them donuts, coach. But it was fun. So I had them.
Yeah.
I was like, look, every time you go past, if you score a touch, and we set it up a couple times, scored a touchdown. I was like, I want you to talk smack and bump Johnny on your way back. Bump him on your way back. Every time you get to go by him, I was like, don't do anything stupid and just run out and just shove him. But if you get a chance, just bump him. They call him a name, talk bad about this. And so all of a sudden, Johnny just loses it on a kid. And so I got back on him and, hey, this is what they're going to try to do. And so the head coach, I didn't tell him, but I told the defensive coordinator, but I didn't tell so the head coach kicks him out. I'm like, coach, you got to let me bring him back. I've set him up. And so I had to go walk into the locker room and like, Johnny, look, I apologize. This is what's going on. And I said, but they're going to do it. That late in that game, we actually ended up playing, our rival, we won, but that did happen. Somebody, and they got a personal foul on him
Oh,
that he didn't even, like, he was like, when they started pushing, and I mean, he wasn't even, it was on a special teams play. I was like, dang it. And so coach is like, you give him a chewing. And so I'm over there. I'm like, now you listen here, Johnny. I know you didn't do anything wrong right here. Then I put my headsets on mute, took them off so I couldn't hear whatever the head coach is telling me. I'm like, and I'm in him, and he's just kind of like, huh? But that's the stuff when I talked to him he's since passed, but talked to him that 3 years ago. He's only been about a year now, but he was like, man, coach, I still look back and laugh at that because you pushed me and you knew that was going to be the right thing. He said, I've never had a fake chewing out in a game where people thought I was in trouble.
that's funny.
But those are the different things.
Just the stories like that, and doing what's best for the kids is just it's why the coaching profession is such a fun profession that's worthwhile. So,
Mhm.
Coach, we're running out of time here. Last question, man. What did I not ask you that I should have?
So I would say, what is one thing that I would tell people to do, and that's to not be ashamed to ask for help. And we do it all the time. that as I played basketball, I mean, if I got beat on a play, I mean, it was an instant thing. Help, help, help. And somebody was going to come in, they'd pass a ball somewhere else, and hopefully they missed that shot and didn't get the layup, or football or whatever. You were always asking for help. But we get outside of here, and I think because I'm almost 40, I got to do all this by myself. But, with my podcast, I've got a coach. With my the admissions, because I'm the director of admissions for Delta College, I have a mentor. I'm also the head pastor for Faith Racers Ministry in Louisiana. I've got a mentor for that. I've got mentors and coaches for just about everything. And people think that, and go look at the greats, they all had their own. But if
Yeah.
I hadn't known how to do that, I wouldn't have won. And it's one that cracks me up. The first championship that I ever won, state championship that I ever won, was with my son racing dirt bikes, a sport I knew absolutely nothing about. I don't like turning wrenches, but I'm our mechanic. I can't tell you how many times I fired our mechanic because that dude's forgot to screw something in, and the bike won't start. Fill in the blank. But I'd have never thought that when I started my coaching career back in 2008. So what is that, 16 years ago? But I had to eventually go ask for help because I didn't know how to coach him anymore. His skills had gotten beyond me. And if I hadn't have done that, he wouldn't be progressing to where he is, to actually being able to go and compete in national races and what have you, because I wasn't good enough. But people are
Yeah.
too
I mean,
ashamed to
you got
ask
to
for help.
lose. I mean, you just got to lose the ego, right? And that's lose the ego and get some help. And it's not and not ask the help before you need it, right? And be like,
Yeah.
hey, like right? It's a great idea to be like, hey, this is going to be difficult. I know it's going to be a struggle. Just ask for help before you. And it's a great situation to have somebody that you're working with. Or people love to help. People love to help,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. And then, as you know, return the favor. Because as I've gotten to
Yeah.
know the new dads coming
Yep.
into motocross, I help them. Look, okay, he's gonna be okay. This is that, whatever. But it was still all, and they get embarrassed, and I'm like, look, I asked the same questions. Everybody asks those questions. Don't be ashamed to ask for help.
Yeah. Well, not everybody asks those questions because, like you said, a lot of people don't ask for help, but
Yeah.
they struggle.
You only know what you know. You only know what you know.
Yep,
But
I
yeah,
know. So, hey, Coach, it's been a phenomenal conversation. We could keep going if we could, but we got to shut it down somewhere. So,
absolutely.
I love the journey that you've been on, that you are on, and and just your passion for it and what you're trying to do with people and creating leaders and just and just helping make people better. And I feel that, right? And I love that. So kudos to you. Keep up the good work.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if anybody want like anything to do, like as far as like, hey, how did you run that program, etc., feel free to reach out to me. My website's coachaclark.com, or you can email me, aaron@coachaclark.com. Uh, and I'll
I'll
get back
put
to you within
I'll
24 to
put
48
all
hours.
I'll put all your links in the show notes, and we'll have it all right there.
Absolutely. So,
All right.
all right, coach, it's been fun.
Thanks, Coach. Yep, you bet. Thank you. I appreciate you coming on.
All right. Awesome. Bye, everybody.
Mettle is a person's ability to face adversity in a spirited and resilient manner. It is a great skill to have for athletics and for life, but it is not something we are born with. If you want it, you have to forge your mettle. And if you listen to the Mental Mettle podcast, you already know that, but not everybody else does yet. So help me out by ordering and wearing some sweet The Mental Mettle podcast gear. We've got short sleeve tees, long sleeve tees, and some super comfortable hoodies. Order online today and you can have your gear in no time. But the best part is that every order helps support the show and helps me spread the message that mental toughness is a trait that can and should be built. So find the link in the show notes, order your gear, and start showing that you know how to forge your mettle. Hopefully you enjoyed that episode with Coach Clark. Again, his information is in the show notes. Check out his website. Send him a note if you have any questions for him. He loves to talk. He loves to tell his story. So reach back out. And again, Thanks again for listening to the Mental Minute Podcast. I genuinely appreciate it. Don't forget, like, share, comment, all those things. It means a lot to me when you do that. When all my listeners are continuing to share and like, I love it. It's one of my favorite things. So, as always, I'm your host, Coach Matt Tillman. This has been the Mental Minute Podcast, and always remember to forge your metal.
Thanks again for listening to the Mental Metal Podcast, produced by Coraggio Media, sponsored by QuickCut, a video management platform for every level of play, and by Mental Metal Coaching, helping athletes learn to face adversity in a spirited and resilient way. The Mental Metal Podcast is created each week to help players develop more mental toughness, and that is something that will help all of us. So help me out and like and share the Mental Metal Podcast with your friends. Until next time, keep forging your metal.